Good afternoon and welcome everyone to a very special event that we're hosting this afternoon on the battle of the best AI models for trading in 2025. We have a really exciting session where we have tested most of the major top AI models specifically for different disciplines for analysis, for trading, research, and screening purposes. And we have a clear winner to share with you and a surprising winner to share with you as far as how to utilize AI in 2025 for your trading. Now, this is a landscape that's changing very, very fast. So hopefully, this is going to be the first of a series that we'll be doing throughout 2025 to help you understand what tools are available to you in this ever fast changing environment that can be helpful to help you become a better trader. Now, every single Thursday, we are dedicated to help you grow you as a trader, help you sustainably and confidently grow your account. As you can see, there are many of you already in the chat window saying hello. So if you're joining us for the first time, you see there's a vibrant community of traders here, all banded together to try to grow as traders. So if you're joining us for the first time, please chime into the chat window, say hello, tell us where you're from. As you can see, we have traders from all over the world. So please make sure that you chime in and say hello. Okay. Now, what we are going to discuss here today is purely for education and demonstration purposes. It is not a solicitation or recommendation to buy or sell any of the specific securities that we'll be using as example purposes during today's session. So make sure that you have some time today to sit through what is roughly going to be about 45 minutes here, because we're going to go through a lot of things. We're going to show you kind of the top three models side by side, comparing them across, like I said, multiple disciplines and showing you where the winner is. And then again, like I said, it's a surprising winner, one that we haven't tested before, but has kind of at the moment seemingly head and shoulders above the other models. So my goal here during today's session is to compare the top AI models across multiple disciplines of equity research. And what we specifically want to do is show you who won that specific comparison. We looked at things like analysis. We looked at utilizing AI to provide accurate and objective views for technical and fundamental analysis, and utilizing AI to research and summarize trends and themes to identify new trading opportunities. So those are the kind of the two areas that we tested these AI models, and we have, like I said, a clear winner across kind of all or both aspects of analysis. So let's jump right into it. Now, before we do, I know many of you are going to be asking, is the session recorded? Can I get the slides? And the answer is yes to both. You'll be able to get both the recording and the slides so that you can watch this at your own pace and test these models out for yourself. And I encourage for anyone watching here today, after we finish, to do some testing on your own. This is by no means an exhaustive a test, but it is a test that is quite telling as far as what shifts have been made in terms of the major AI models and which ones are clear winners for investors to utilize these models for trading. So kind of leading off, let's talk a little bit about the top models in 2025. Now, the top models haven't changed so much, but there have been significant what's the right word? Releases as far as the different models uh, for different reasoning purposes, for different models that each of these companies have released over the past 3 to 6 months. And we have seen some pretty substantial gains from a couple of them that were so far behind, we didn't even bother testing them. So, for the most part, we've covered AI throughout all of 2024, a little bit in 2023, and we predominantly covered ChatGPT. We did do a little bit of testing on Gemini because Gemini, obviously, or Alphabet rather, was the pioneer of this particular space. But because of various safety and regulatory reasons, they decided not to release those models. And ChatGPT really kind of stole the show. So for all of 2024, ChatGPT was by far the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and none of the other models really touched a candle to ChatGPT. However, fast forward now to the beginning of 2025, you have Gemini 2.0 that has come out, and multiple iterations of that model has seen some significant leaps and bounds of that particular model that even in certain instances are beating out ChatGPT. And then, kind of the underdog here was really X.com's AI Grok 2. So X.com that is built on an open source model that Meta created, the Llama model. But because X.com is now or the XAI model, the Grok 2 model, is able to reference all Twitter posts. It makes it incredibly powerful in terms of real-time sentiment and research. So we'll talk a little bit about all of that. And there are other models that we didn't get a chance to test. Claude 3.5 is probably the fourth big model out there. We did do some initial testing on it and did not see any good results, which is why we didn't include it in this particular test. DeepSeek recently just came out with a new model that actually is beating ChatGPT's O1 model, which is their most advanced model. But that just came out a few days ago, so we haven't had a chance to test that either. And the Llama 3 model, which is the open source model that Meta has created, we've seen a lot of open source models being created on the back of that. And there's just so many, we can't test them all. But at the moment, what we are testing the three probably most popular models, and that is, like I said, OpenAI, Gemini, which is Google's AI model, and Grok, which is X.com's AI model. And you can find those links here, right here on your screen, chatgpt.com, gemini.google.com, and x.com/i/Grok. So these are all publicly accessible. Every single one of these now offers free models. I do think that if you do pay for them, and they're usually in the range of around anywhere from $10 to $20 a month, you're going to get significantly improved performance in terms of how many messages you can send, how fast you're getting the results in, and also ChatGPT's O1 model, which is their most advanced model, is only available for paid subscribers. But we didn't test that. We only tested the free models. We wanted to compare the models that you can have access to for free side by side and see which one is performing better in this type of market environment. Okay, so just to help kind of set what our testing framework was, we kind of broke it down into three different categories. First one was technical and fundamental analysis. What we wanted to try to do is see if these AI models was able to provide an accurate and objective view of the stock's chart and fundamentals. Now, in 2024, we did cover quite a bit on technical analysis. We showed you how you can use ChatGPT to kind of build specific prompts to help you analyze a price or a technical analysis chart in a more objective view. Because I think one of the biggest drawbacks to technical analysis is that there is an infinite number of indicators that you can draw. Within those parameters, there is an infinite number of parameters that you can have those indicators on. And as humans, what we do is, if a chart doesn't give us the view that we want, sometimes what we do is we just keep changing indicators until we find an indicator that agrees with our original bias. And that is obviously not the best way to utilize technical analysis. What you want to do is you want to use a price chart objectively, and you want to look at the price chart through that same objective lens day in and day out, so that you get a consistent view of various stocks that you want to get an opinion on. So we covered quite a bit of that in 2024 as far as how ChatGPT's, especially the ChatGPT 4 model, allows you to do that, because you can effectively throw in screenshots, you can have it view your computer and quickly analyze a chart and give you an objective view. So we've already covered a lot of that, but what we did this time is we found that previously we had to give a lot of instruction. We had to tell ChatGPT, here's how we want you to analyze it, here's what indicators to use, and then it was able to provide that objective view. But what we wanted to do now is, because these models have a lot more reasoning power now, we wanted to ask it a much more generic question and see what it was able to come up with. How accurate was it? And would we agree as technical analysts with the view that it created created. And we saw a pretty wide range of results from the different models. So really kind of different tests than what we did in 2024. And then in 2024, we also tried to look at fundamental data, and we found that all the models fell completely flat when it came to the fundamental analysis, mostly from the perspective of they did not have the ability to pull the correct fundamental data. And it's still at the moment a challenge for a lot of these models to get the right data. However, what we have found is that there's been huge improvements, right? First of all, ChatGPT has a far better capabilities of searching websites and pulling data. Gemini is obviously connected to Google and has access to a lot of Google Finance data, and X.AI has access to Twitter data. So the ability to get data has improved significantly in 2025, and you'll see that here in a minute. But it's still at the moment not perfect, and that's really kind of where we want to make sure you understand what's working, what's not working, and how to kind of get the best results out of these AI models to kind of help you do some of your fundamental analysis. And then what we looked at is helping you summarize earnings reports, because I always advocate for traders who are investing or trading in any specific stock to have a good understanding of what the company does, how much money do they make, are they profitable, and just what the general outlook of the company is from the management. But no one has time to sit on those earnings calls. No one has time to read those transcripts. So one of the best use cases, one of the fantastic use cases of AI is to help you summarize large documents and provide you with a consistent objective view of what was in those specific documents. And call transcripts that are sometimes 50 pages long are the perfect use case for this. And it's incredibly helpful in giving you a better understanding, a deep dive into each company before you're investing in it, to understand what they're doing well, what management is optimistic about, perhaps what things are they concerned about, what their future outlook is, because that has a huge impact on whether or not you should invest in it. And this is the work that equity analysts used to get paid $200,000 a year to pour over this data and condense it down for you. And the problem with equity research is that there's a big conflict of interest in terms of who's putting out research and the brokerage firms that are employing them. So this basically allows you to employ your own equity analyst that's hopefully unbiased and provide you with the insights that you are looking for. We're going to show you the prompts that we use to try to create that. And this is actually one of the most promising aspects of AI that I think is going to significantly improve most traders' insights into a company before they make an investment. So we'll talk a little bit about the results from that. And then lastly, we will talk about thematic research. And this really comes from the fact that day in and day out, you get ideas pitched to you, you get news coming out to you, you get new themes that you might be interested in. And the question is, how do you go about identifying companies that give you exposure to a specific idea, a specific theme, help you think outside the box, and do the underlying research behind the different ideas to find kind of trading opportunities in a relatively quick format? And I found myself earlier this week with the announcement of Project Stargate. Certainly, we can all debate that there probably isn't $500 billion of money to throw around to invest in AI infrastructure, but there certainly is going to be likely tens of billions, if not at least $100 billion being thrown into the ring in terms of building out AI infrastructure, specifically data centers here in the US, so that the US remains incredibly competitive from that perspective. And that's going to drive a huge amount of gains in specific industries, specific companies. How do you identify those companies that have the high amount of exposure, and how do you research those companies so that you can find kind of the best ones within that? So that's kind of the last thing that we did, is kind of thinking about thematic research. So a pretty wide, broad range of tests that we did here, and I really want to just dive into it. But I want to give you a clear understanding as to what we tested, and so that you can see the results, because they were somewhat surprising. Okay? Does that make sense, everyone? Please type 1 into the chat window if that makes sense to you. Perfect. Okay, so let's first talk about technical analysis because this is the one that, AI was already doing pretty good at in 2024 with ChatGPT. And like I said, when we did it in 2024 at the time when the ChatGPT 4 model came out, and you can, throw voice, text, PDF documents at it, whatever it was able to kind of take multiple media types and be able to analyze it very quickly. It made it a lot easier for us to just say, look at my screen and tell me what you think about the chart. And what we found at the time is that if you threw just a very open-ended question like that, it wasn't very good at answering the question. You really had to give it very specific prompts, like analyze it this specific way, use this indicator. And you can kind of take a look at that webinar if you want to view that we did in 2024 and what AI models were capable of doing then. Here, what we're doing is we're taking this Visa chart. We just recently put out a bullish theme on Visa in our weekly trade ideas report. And we wanted to just say, here's a chart, provide me with the prompt that we use is provide me with your objective analysis of this chart. You have a price chart on top, a relative strength chart in the middle, and you have a MACD at the bottom. That was all we told. It was just just to provide an understanding of what is on the screen. And what we did is we plugged this exact image that you see here on your screen and that exact prompt into OpenAI's ChatGPT, into Grok, and into Gemini. And we got pretty interesting results. So I want to show you those results here right now. So let's take a look at Grok and what we got. So like I said, we provided this objective analysis of the chart, exact same prompt I just showed you and that exact image that I showed you. And what came out of Grok was surprisingly quite good. It broke down the price chart, what the trend is, what was happening in the chart, the ratio chart, meaning what's going on with the relative performance of the S&P 500 relative to Visa. It had a very good, clear view of kind of what was happening from a relative performance perspective, as well as just kind of some insights. And then MACD broke down kind of the three. So it kind of gave me exactly what I was looking for. It's an objective view on kind of each one of the three. And more importantly, it gave me a really good summary of each individual one and kind of a thought process of how to think about this particular chart. So and that I didn't ask it for anything specific. I didn't say, tell me if it's bullish or bearish or whether it's, I didn't give it any specific details. And it broke it down into what I would expect if I had gone to someone who's a certified CMT and I said, here's a chart, what do you think? The level of detail that I would expect from an experienced technical analyst to be able to provide me the type of insights that Grok was able to do from just a simple prompt. So, like I said, this is kind of a pretty significant leap forward in terms of what the AI models have been capable of is to do that. And this is all included in the slides. So when you download the slides, when we send you the recording, you'll be able to get the exact prompt that I use to be able to get this type of analysis. And you can pull your charts from whatever charting package you prefer and throw it into Grok, and you should expect to see a pretty detailed analysis, a detailed, accurate, and objective view. Those are the three things that we were looking for from these models. And Grok was a pretty good result from that perspective. And then what we did is we put it into ChatGPT, the exact same model. We used the same image, the exact same prompt, and what we got from ChatGPT was something very similar. It broke down the price chart, the relative strength chart, and the momentum, the MACD, and it gave us a pretty good analysis of each one. And even kind of threw in a few ones that was even volume. It threw in volume from the price chart perspective. It gave you key observations. It gave you some context of the overall trend, and more importantly, it gave you that summary, right? It gave you a summary in terms of what strengths, what concerns, and what the kind of balance of all of that is, the outlook that it provided. So kind of giving you that objective view, looking at the things that are on this specific chart and being able to provide that accurate and objective view of what you're seeing on the chart. And then lastly, we threw it into Gemini. The same thing, same prompt, same chart. And while Gemini did give us kind of the breakdown between the overall trend, price chart, relative strength, and MACD, Gemini was a little bit, I would say, lacking. Number one, it didn't understand the relative chart. It thought it was an RSI chart, which is just an incorrect interpretation of what a relative performance chart is. So that's the first, I would say, black mark against Gemini in this particular instance. The interpretation also, in my opinion, was incorrect. It didn't realize that towards the end of the chart, it was trending higher. It was telling me that the stock was trending lower. So Gemini, in this particular case, I would say has failed it because it wasn't particularly accurate and it wasn't the analysis that I told it that what it was looking at in terms of the chart. So from this perspective, I think that it was a pretty close. It was a pretty close. What's the right word? Result from between Grok and ChatGPT. And like I said, last year, the only thing that was producing anything remotely useful was ChatGPT. But as you can see, Grok has made some pretty significant gains that I actually think Grok, in this particular case, edges out ChatGPT by just a little bit. It provided the most accurate characterization of the various indicators with a clear objective view. That was what I was looking for. And the clear loser in this particular case was Gemini. It misunderstood one of the indicators and the accuracy was just not there. Like I said, pretty surprising. Gemini it seemed like it was doing pretty well and on a good trajectory last year, towards the end of the year. But, there's still quite a few things about Gemini that's just not quite working correct. So that is where we stand on the technical analysis side. Does that make sense, everyone? Please type 2 into the chat window if that makes sense to you. Yeah, so the winner for technical analysis was Grok, and the loser in this particular case was Gemini. Not everyone had a loser, but this one had a clear loser where it just clearly fell flat on this particular test, right? So if you're using technical analysis and you're thinking about using it as a tool, definitely give Grok a try. ChatGPT is a pretty reliable tool if you, let's say, for example, already paying for ChatGPT. Very close second, in my opinion. Okay. Next, we looked at fundamental analysis. And the goal here for fundamental analysis is a little different because last year we found that almost all of the models, ChatGPT, Grok, Gemini, fell completely flat when you asked it to pull any type of financial data. If you ask, these models, what's the PE ratio of Apple? You got wildly different results depending on the model you use, and you got wildly different results depending on the day that you were using the model. So we basically found that it was completely useless in 2024 for this particular purpose. But we have found that those things have improved significantly in 2025. And our goal was to see, number one, can it get accurate fundamental data and the ability to search for opportunities using a specific criteria? So what we did is a series of prompts, right? Fundamental data, you need to kind of think of it like if you were talking to an equity analyst and you're trying to kind of get some ideas from them, you're trying to understand like what opportunities there are. So we had a series of prompts. The first one is, can you tell me the forward PE ratio of the Magnificent Seven? This was really just to get a sense for, can it pull the accurate data? And then we asked, what is the expected analyst growth rates for EPS for those 7 companies? Meaning, what are analysts expecting the future growth rates of these specific companies? Now that is not something that is in the financial data of the companies that are reporting, right? That's something that you have to go out and search for. So that was, one thing was like, these are standardized financials that, technically you can pull from a source. Analyst growth rates are something that are more consensus based, and you have to kind of figure out what that consensus is. So a little bit different in terms of the question that we're asking. And then we asked it, what are the net margins for those 7 companies? So kind of digging one level deeper, like PE ratio is a very common metric, almost available anywhere. Net margins, not so much. So we want to kind of dig a little deeper and see if it's able to find more deeper data. And then lastly, we asked it questions are, what are some of the most undervalued tech companies that have high net margins? So basically start thinking about how can it help me screen for opportunities? And we ran all 4 prompts through all 3 models and got some really interesting results here as well. So I want to show that to you. So let's pull that up here on Grok. Let me find that and show you. Here we go for Grok. Here's for ChatGPT, and here's for Similar. Okay, so let's show you Grok first. So can you tell me the forward PE ratio of the Magnificent Seven? And it was able to pull me these numbers. Now, these numbers were very, very close to the numbers that we were using from from our latest source. But as you can see, this was data found on x.com, right? So what we found was that these were very, very close to the real numbers, but they were still slightly off. And none of the models got things exactly right, but there were some surprising results. So Grok, because it's able to pull data from x.com, was able to get some pretty accurate results, for something like simple and very popular, like a PE ratio. So that was the first thing, right? Because when we asked simple questions like this to ChatGPT last year, in when we were doing some of these in June and July and August, they completely fell flat. It either said we couldn't find it, or it would do a lot of searching and come back with just some crazy results. Next, we asked, what is the expected analyst growth rates for EPS for these 7 companies? And we got, numbers that were pretty close to what, our expected numbers were going to be. So again, pulling these numbers from x.com, able to kind of find a consensus. I will say these are big companies that have a lot of volume in terms of messaging on x.com. So it was able to pull kind of a pretty good consensus that was, in my opinion, pretty accurate. Not the most accurate, but pretty accurate here. What are the net margins for those companies? It was able to pull pretty accurate net margins, but some of them were off, like saying that Tesla's net margin was negative 45.8. And also notice that some of this data was kind of old, Q4 2023 for Apple. I found that kind of surprising because, with Apple, you would expect that most likely you'll be able to get more updated numbers. Same thing for Tesla, but it wasn't able to do so. And then lastly, what are some of the most undervalued tech companies that have high net margins? And this is actually surprisingly where Grok excelled quite a bit. It was able to help me identify stocks that had relatively low PE, that had high net margins, high growth rates, decent growth rates, high net margins. And those are good starting points in terms of if you wanted to do some research, say, I want to look at some energy companies that are undervalued but have high net margins, or overvalued with low net margins. Good way to kind of get a good sense for potential investment opportunities that you haven't screened for. A lot of people asked me last year, how can I use AI for screening purposes? And I basically said, you can't. They don't have access to the data. The data is not accurate. And the way that it's able to even, for whatever data it did have, it didn't provide good results. But we're starting to see these AI models get a lot better at this. And this is only going to improve in the future. So Grok has made leaps and bounds in terms of its ability to pull this type of information. Now let's look at ChatGPT. Magnificent Seven, 4 PE ratios. This was pretty good, but there were still some things that were off. NVIDIA, 4 PE ratio of 47. That's way off. It's trading at about 29, 30 times forward earnings. Tesla, 95. That's also quite a bit off. We're trading at about 120, 130 times forward earnings. Alphabet, 21. That's accurate. Meta's trading about 24, 25. So it's a little bit off here. We asked it, what are the net margins for each of these stocks? This one, it did get pretty close, but there were still some that were off. NVIDIA saying was 15%, that was way off. Tesla 2.5%, that was quite a bit off. Apple 25 was correct. Alphabet 21% was close. Microsoft and Meta at 30% was a little bit higher than average. So, this is really where ChatGPT, again, is struggling a little bit in terms of getting those numbers very accurate. They're getting ballpark numbers, but they're not particularly accurate. And I wouldn't necessarily rely on them so heavily from a screening purpose perspective. We asked it for analyst growth rates for the EPS of these particular companies. And this is really where I felt that this was pretty good. But again, in the right ballpark, but not 100% accurate. Meta, 58%, that's just not right. It's closer to around 20, 25%. Microsoft, 10%, that's in the right ballpark. Apple, 8.5%, that's in the right ballpark. NVIDIA, 140%, right ballpark. So a lot of these, like I said, kind of not quite there. And then lastly, we asked it, what are some of the most undervalued tech companies that have high net margins? And this is actually where ChatGPT did a pretty good job. It gave you, the valuation, it gave you the net margins, and it did the analysis. But like I said, the numbers were not all super accurate, but the analysis was correct. So, these Models will over time get better and better, hopefully, at pulling the more correct data and maybe get access to data sources. And we are actually working on our own custom GPTs to connect some of the most accurate real-time data so that you can actually screen for this, knowing that the data coming back from it is very accurate. And those are some of the tools that we're looking to launch in 2025 because of these kind of shortcomings that these AI models have, that we want to use these models for this particular type of research, but you need to have accurate data. So we are in the process of connecting our own data to these models so that we can have reliable data. And then lastly, Gemini. What are the PE ratios? And this is one where Gemini almost got it perfect. Almost all of these were in the exact ballpark we were looking for, except for Tesla. Tesla at 64 is not accurate, so really closer to double that. But everyone else was within 1 or 2 percentage points of the number that we were expecting. What are the net margins? This one was also very accurate. NVIDIA 53%, Microsoft 35, Meta 24, 34, Alphabet 28, Apple 27, Amazon 9, Tesla 9. Those are all very, very accurate. And I think this is partially because Google has access to Google Finance, and they're pulling some of that data from there. So it's far more accurate. What are the expected analyst growth rates for EPS for these companies? It gave you a range, which I liked, right? And it was, like I said, pretty in the right ballpark for all of these numbers. NVIDIA 30 to 40%, closer to 55. Tesla 20 to 25, Amazon 20-25, Apple kind of low double digits, Alphabet and Meta in that 15, 20, 20 to 25. So we're all in the right range when it comes to Gemini. And then lastly, we got the net margins. I think we said that those. Actually, no, we didn't go through net. Oh, we did go through net margins. Net margins were correct. And then lastly, what are some of the most undervalued tech companies? And this is actually where I also felt that Gemini did a good job. It was able to identify companies that, I hadn't had on my radar, and it was able to give me an understanding of kind of the business. What it lacked was it didn't give me the actual valuation. So it assumed that it's undervalued, but I don't know why it says that it's undervalued. It didn't give me any specific metrics. It did give me kind of high net margins, but didn't give me any of the metrics. So this is really where I think that this is kind of by far the most challenging test that we gave each of these models. Each one of these, I think, had some strength and some weaknesses within each one of these. And from my perspective, I think the winner here in terms of most accurate and updated financial data is clearly Gemini. But in terms of the ability to screen for stocks based on a specific criteria, this is really where I think Grok was head and shoulders above the other ones. There's still some accuracy concerns with Grok, but like I said, compared to last year, we are in a whole nother, it's like going from the Stone Age to the Industrial Revolution from what we've seen from last year to this year. So leaps and bounds better, not quite exactly what I would rely on, but I will show you one other way that I think we can utilize this to do some of the research that I'm talking about here in some of our later tests. Okay, does that make sense, everyone? Please type 3 into the chat window if that makes sense to you. Perfect. Okay, now let's move on to things like summarizing earnings reports. And the goal here, again, is to provide an accurate summary of the company's latest earnings report with both positive and negative factors, and helping me understand what the company provided in terms of forward guidance. Now, this is a pretty generic request, right? But the goal is to try to get a standardized understanding of each company's latest earnings report, and you can easily just swap out, here I use Microsoft in this particular prompt, right? You can take this exact prompt, change the symbol, and get a standardized report of each company and what their management team is conveying to investors. And like I said, this is, if you think about the equity analysts on Wall Street, this is predominantly the source of information that they're going to produce all of those research reports. So if you look at those Morningstar, S&P research reports that are being provided to you by your brokerage firm, analysts are attending these calls. They're sometimes even participating in these calls, and all of the data that they're coming back and producing in that report is effectively coming out of these earnings calls. And now what you're able to do is effectively sort of beat them at their own game, because now you're able to get an objective view, right? Because an analyst has a bit of a conflict of interest between who they're employed by and the research that they're putting out. You can get a more unbiased research from these earnings reports. You can customize the prompts a little bit more depending on what you're really looking for. But I thought it was good to get, number one, get a summary of the financials, how they stacked up against the analyst expectations. That was my first request, right? Break down the reported financials and how they stacked up against analyst expectations, meaning did the company beat or miss earnings? Provide me with a list of kind of positive and negative factors that came out of the earnings report, meaning what things did management speak positively about the company, what negatives did they speak about, and then providing this summary of the outlook guidance that they provided for the future, meaning how rosy does the management feel the future is going to be, and this is going to be a really good application of AI. This is going to be the strongest results. This is kind of where all of the models were pretty close. I will show you kind of what the results are across these three. Okay, so let's take a look at where we have this. So I'll pull up the earnings reports. All right, so let's take a look at this. So this was Grox, the same thing. Can you summarize for me the latest earnings call from Microsoft, break down the financials, how they stacked up against expectations, positive and negative factors, and a summary of the outlook? And this is what we got, is results from the financials. So these were the financials, 65.5 billion in revenue, 16% increase year over year. Where the earnings per share was, the breakdown between the cloud revenue, commercial bookings, all the things that were detailed in the financials reports, it kind of gives you a summary of it, right? And, if you're reading this for the first time for a specific company, these might not make a lot, these might not mean a whole lot to you. But if you read these quarter to quarter, and for the companies that you're invested in, you'll start to see these have meaningful uses to you in terms of seeing how these numbers change. It tells you the comparison with earnings, with analyst expectations. So it beat on revenue, it beat on earnings, and then it gave me a breakdown of positive and negative points. What things did they speak positively about the business? What things did they, talk about in terms of risks, like a decrease in gross margins, decrease in cash flow? So some pretty, significant things that we should be concerned about if you're investing. And then outlook in terms of guidance for the future. What are they expecting? Cloud growth is going to be, what they expect the Microsoft 365 business is going to bring in, what AI is going to be doing, those types of things, how much they expect to invest in terms of building out AI. And I did it for multiple companies here. I did it for Dexcom just to kind of get a sense for how it did across. Microsoft is obviously a big company, smaller companies. How well was it able to do that? It gave me the exact same comparison for stocks like Dexcom, reported financials, how they stacked up against analysts, positive and negative reports and guidance. And this is really where I felt that it gave me exactly what I was looking for, a standardized report of an objective view that's accurate of what the company is telling us they think about the business. So you're getting the information from the source rather than kind of being distilled by an equity analyst that has, like I said, some conflict of interest between the output that they put out with kind of the overall business and who they're employed by, right? Same thing here for ChatGPT. I did the same thing for Microsoft. And this is actually where initially ChatGPT fell short, because it told me that it hasn't released earnings yet, when I clearly asked for what was the previous or the latest earnings report. So I had to kind of clarify a little bit, and eventually it gave me what I was looking for. It had its most recent earning call, gave me the performance, the financial performance. It did give me the comparison to analyst expectations. It broke down kind of the specific portions of the business, like cloud and personal computing and things like that. And then positive and negative highlights gave me that, and outlook and guidance. So it really kind of gave me everything. Did the same thing for Dexcom. And like I said, this is really where I feel these models are, this is kind of the type of problem that these models excel at. So the difference in terms of variation between each of the models were much, much smaller. Like the other ones, we had vastly different kind of results from the different things that we threw at it. But for this type of problem, most of the models had pretty similar, meaning they were all pretty accurate. They were pretty standardized. They gave me kind of exactly what I was looking for, slightly different variations for each one. And I think that if you're using these, you might want to adjust the prompts a little bit more, be a little bit more specific about what you want to see, and you're going to get really good results once you kind of dial it in, right? This was kind of a good standardized test to kind of get a sense for how these models are performing. And lastly, Gemini. Same thing. Recent call, reported financials, positive and negative. It told me beat expectations. So all of that stuff, positive and negative, bullet points, outlook guidance. And I did it for for multiple companies. I did it for Visa, I did it for Dexcom, and I did it for Microsoft, just to get a sense for kind of how it did across all of them. And like I said, the results were pretty similar across all three. So to kind of declare a winner, I actually thought ChatGPT provided with the most complete and accurate research based on the requested format. So this is kind of just, ChatGPT is by far the 800-pound gorilla in the room with regards to, these AI models. And it was a slight beat on all of these, but I think ChatGPT was just that one bit better than the other models in terms of accuracy, in terms of what it was to provide me with in standardized formats. So this is something that I do think there wasn't a clear winner. There certainly weren't any losers, but I certainly would think ChatGPT was just slightly better at it. But if you were using Gemini or Grok, you would get similarly decent results as you did with ChatGPT. And lastly, thematic research. And the goal here was to find the best stocks for a specific theme and have it give you reasoning behind it and the financial data to back it up. And I had a thought earlier this week. When President Trump announced Project Stargate, immediately my thought was, if even if they were throwing a fraction of the numbers that they were talking about, right? The headline number is 500 billion, and I think we all agree that that's unlikely going to happen. But even if they were throwing out a fraction, let's say 100 billion of dollars towards building out of AI infrastructure, that's a lot of money flowing into one specific kind of sector, right? So how can we identify opportunities in that sector? And then how do we think about what are kind of the adjacent things that are going to benefit from it as well that are not as obvious? And I think this is also a great problem for AI. So, I gave it a series of prompts. What are the public companies that are most likely to benefit from President Trump's Project Stargate and why? What are the most obvious companies? I'm sorry. And based on what it gave me, I basically said, well, those are the most obvious companies. What if we dug one layer deeper, such as energy suppliers, companies in the communication sectors, just to kind of get a sense for what it was able to dig out even further beyond just the kind of the most obvious suggestions. And then I asked it for even further, what other sectors may I have missed, to see kind of how deep it can go. And then lastly, I said, okay, so across all of these companies, what are the forward PE ratios of each one? What is the expected EPS growth? What is the expected revenue growth? What are their net margins? And I specifically gave it a place to pull data from to see kind of it was able to pull the kind of the most accurate data. So this was a really interesting test because, I think that this is kind of where the bulk of equity research, the amount of time that it takes to do this work is incredibly difficult, and this is really where we want to try to leverage AI specifically for these types of problems. So really interesting results here as well. Let me show that to you. All right, so this is Grok. What are public companies that are most likely to benefit? And it gave you kind of a breakdown: NVIDIA, Oracle, Microsoft, SoftBank, ARM, semiconductors. And notice that, the day after the report, Oracle and ARM, Oracle was up like 6-7%, ARM was up 17%, right? So it was able to identify companies that immediately out of the gate had really high exposure to this particular thing. So really interesting, and it kind of gave me some rationale. And then I said, okay, so these are the most obvious questions. Help me dig one deep layer. And then it gave me energy suppliers, communication sectors. Those are kind of what I gave it. And it said additional considerations: data center REITs, infrastructure companies. And it gave me a breakdown of specific companies within each sector that have potential exposure and why it picked these specific companies. So really good work in terms of helping you do some initial research to figure out what public companies can I potentially buy that would give me exposure to this specific theme, right? And we kind of have themes that are thrown at us all day long. And the hard part is figuring out what companies to buy if you believe in a specific theme. And then I said, let's go one step deeper. Or what other sectors have I missed? Then it started looking at cooling and HVAC systems, which are, really important for these data centers. Cybersecurity, waste management. And I certainly would not have thought about water management in terms of, exposure to this specific thing. Specialty materials and metals, real estate and development, specialty construction, software and data management, compliance consulting, environmental services. So it really got deep and gave me kind of reasoning behind sectors and specific companies. And then I lastly asked it, okay, so across all of these companies, what's their forward PE ratio? What's their expected growth rate? What are their net margins? And pull the data from these specific sources. And this is really where it was able to pull this data from the specific source that I gave. And it gave me all of these forward PE ratios, expected growth rates, net margins. So now I can start doing some analysis and doing some digging to see which ones are, at the top of my list. I can go even further and say, okay, which ones have low PE, and help me sift this data even further. Now, I didn't get any further than this, but this is really leaps and bounds forward in terms of what you're able to do. You used to have to hire a team of equity analysts as a hedge fund or as a portfolio manager to do this type of work for you, and it would take them probably a few weeks to get back to you with these types of results. I got in under 2 minutes. So like I said, Grok leaps and bounds in terms of what I was able to do. Now let's look at ChatGPT. It also gave me some of the more, initially gave me the most obvious answers: Oracle, NVIDIA, Microsoft, ARM, SoftBank, the same, almost the exact same companies. And I said, so let's dig a little deeper. I went into the energy companies, very similar companies that it gave back to me. Communications, very similar companies that gave back to me, is the same one as Grok. But this one, actually, interesting, ChatGPT, I only said look at communications and energy as an example, but without prompting it to look at other, it already dug in further deeper. It already looked at industrial equipment. So it looked at Caterpillar, Train Technologies. It looked at semiconductors, which specific semiconductors, real estate and REITs, Digital Realty Trust, Prologis. This was another one that, when I asked Grok to dig deeper, I was able to find, but ChatGPT immediately offered it up. Specialized software, conclusion. So I didn't have to ask ChatGPT to go even further, even though I could, but it already had done that deeper work. And this is kind of where I think ChatGPT excels a little bit from that perspective. And then when I asked it to pull, financial data, this is really where ChatGPT was kind of iffy on. A lot of it wasn't able to provide the data. So it clearly was able to pull the data for some companies from the source that I asked it to, but for a lot of the companies, it wasn't able to pull it from that exact source. So I didn't really understand why, because if it was able to pull from one company, it should be able to pull from all the companies. But this is really the last part where ChatGPT fell flat. But at least it gave me a really good lay of the land of like, where should I think about investing if I have a specific or believe in a specific theme. And lastly, Gemini. Gemini, like I said, off the top gave me kind of very similar companies, but I thought was a little bit poorer in terms of its reasoning on the things. Certainly not the ones that I would initially go on in terms of the most obvious companies. And then when I asked it to kind of dig a little deeper, it did give me some of the same companies that we were talking about in the other ones, like NextEra, Constellation Energy, Exelon, the grid infrastructure companies, fiber optics, telecommunications, satellite, cooling, water management, construction. So eventually kind of got to the same results as Grok, but really took a little bit more work to kind of get there. And I thought the results were just a little bit not as strong as in terms of reasoning between Grok and ChatGPT versus Gemini. Any sectors I may have missed, and then I kind of got really deep in advanced materials, cybersecurity. So eventually, all of these ended up getting to very much the same results. And I just realized that I never prompted the alphabet Google for the last prompt. So let's actually do that live together, see what we get. And one thing I will say, Gemini has a lot more guardrails built into it. So when I first asked this question, what are public companies that are most likely to benefit from President Trump's project, it actually did not give me any results telling me that because it doesn't do anything political. So the President Trump kind of basically stopped it in its tracks. So I had to go around it. I had to remove the President Trump part from the prompt before it was able to give me the results. So Gemini has all these guardrails built into it that Grok definitely doesn't have. ChatGPT is sort of in the middle. So I don't know if that makes any difference for any of you using this, but I like Grok from the perspective of it doesn't censor anything the way that Alphabet does. Obviously, a sensitive topic these days. I know why it didn't work, because whenever I prompted this particular thing to Gemini, it always gave me this error message, and it still continued to give me this error message. So Google just flat out refuses to do the equity research part of this. It kind of gave me some decent results after I did some digging, even though the results, in my opinion, were not as good as Grok or ChatGPT. And when I asked it to pull the financial data, it flat out just decided not to do it. So that's kind of where we are at in terms of thematic research. So like I said, I think the winner here is going to be Grok. ChatGPT is a very close second, and Gemini, I think, did a pretty good job of the initial analysis, but when it kind of really got down to the meat of the stuff to try to get investment results, that's really where Gemini completely fell flat. ChatGPT, great results in terms of companies, fell flat on the financial data side of things, where Grok really just excelled on all four prompts, giving me exactly what I'm looking for each of the prompts, digging deeper, and then pulling the financial data that I needed to eventually do my analysis to decide which ones I might want to invest in my uh, in my portfolio. So, like I said, really surprising result. When we had tested out Grok last year, it couldn't hold a candle to ChatGPT, and now it's won 3 out of the 4 tests. And on the 4th test that it didn't win, which ChatGPT edged it out by a little bit, it was just barely behind. So I would say that it was a clear winner. That was completely unexpected that Grok won 3 out of the 4 tests and clearly is holding a very strong candidate against ChatGPT these days. The recent models and updates for Grok has propelled it to the forefront of AI specifically for training research, and that's only Grok 2, right? Grok 3 is coming out. I'm hoping that that's going to provide even further um, gains to what we're seeing here. But test different models for different various use cases. As you saw, there is slight differences between the different models in terms of what they perform. So hopefully this gives you a clear understanding as to when I want an AI to analyze a chart, which models should I use? When I'm trying to do the research, which ones should I use? And kind of you want to experiment a little bit with the different models, and you also want to experiment with the prompts, right? So I'm going to give you the exact prompts that I use so that you can replicate what I've done here today. But like I said, you want to make some subtle changes to each one, right? Especially on things like summarize earnings reports. I gave a very generic summary. Maybe you might want to say be more specific in this area so I can kind of very clearly see these specific things. And AI is going to do a pretty good job at doing that. So experiment with some of these prompts. So I'm giving you kind of a starting point, a really good starting point, but do your fine tweaks, and you can really use these AI tools and become a really, really powerful investor, because you effectively now have a team of equity analysts behind you in real time. We're doing the work for you that you used to have to pay millions of dollars for a team that would take weeks of work to do. Now is done for $10 a month in a matter of seconds. So this is really what's revolutionizing kind of why Project Stargate is such a big deal, and why the US wants to make sure that they maintain superiority in this particular what's the right word, sector. And I think that this is an incredibly interesting opportunity, both as a trader to utilize these tools and as an investor for the companies that will benefit from these types of this industry. So hopefully this gives you a pretty comprehensive view of kind of what has changed in the landscape of AI, how you can utilize it to make you a more objective and better trader, as having access to the best research. And at this point, I'll open this for questions. I've gone pretty long here. I don't have that much time for questions, but I'll try to answer as many questions as I have time for. But while you put your questions into the Q&A window, if you want access to the slides where I have all the prompts that I've gave you here today, you just need to sign up for a free trial at optionsplay.com. Optionsplay.com/sign up. Point your phone to that QR code. You'll get slides. You'll get the prompts. You'll get the recording. We post it on Sunday afternoon on YouTube, so you can follow us on our YouTube channel. When you get the recording, please subscribe. 65% of you watching our YouTube channel have not subscribed. By simply clicking that subscribe button, it helps us a lot. So please do so by going to youtube.com/optionsplay. And if you don't currently have a free trial, sign up for that free trial so that you'll get access to the slides and recording and the platform. And like I said, we are currently working on our own custom GPT so that you can have access to the most accurate data alongside with these models, because that's really kind of where a lot of these models fall a little bit short, is the accuracy of the financial data. It certainly doesn't have access to real-time stock and option quotes. We are working on having a single ChatGPT model that will be able to access those things like real-time stock and option quotes, trade ideas, our own trade ideas, as well as accurate financial data, so that you can actually do a lot of this work and knowing that the data coming back from it is accurate. So let's turn this over to the Q&A. I don't have a lot of time, so I'll try to get through as many as I possibly can. Are you also having reviewed AI agents? And if not, what is that available? So, AI agents are usually ones that are custom made. I've certainly tested quite a few of them. A lot of them I don't particularly think are that great. There's a few that I rely on. I use one for summarizing earnings calls. But I find that a lot of times it's better just to write the prompt yourself, because that's the only thing that AI agents are. Someone else wrote the prompt for you. But if you experiment a little, and I think this is a skill set that everyone should learn, is how to write their own prompts. Because if you constantly have to rely on other people, you're going to be behind the curve, right? Learn how to write your own prompts. You'll get, it's not that hard. It's common sense. If you can communicate something in English, you'll be able to get the same results as someone else who's built an AI agent for you. Claude by Anthropic seemed a little bit better. Claude really fell short when it came to pulling financial data. Like, it couldn't do any of it, and that's why it didn't include it in this test result. What is the risk of manipulated data being dished out like it was happening with search engine? It's always possible, right? And that's why that's why I've done the legwork to help you understand, where do we see the most accurate data. That's why I did this whole analysis, because I truly wanted to know myself, and hopefully now you have that information as well. Are there publicly available sources for estimates for PE ratio? No, there's not. Forward PE ratio is something that is consensus based, and firms that do put out that consensus protect that as much as they can, because that's part of what they have to monetize. Do you provide your definition of undervalued companies? I do not, and I specifically didn't want to have to provide a specific criteria. I wanted to see if these models were able to inference that stuff on its own, right? Because whenever you have like a specific criteria, you might miss out on things, right? Because there's always things that don't fit that particular criteria that are undervalued. So I wanted to see kind of what it was able to reason from that. And that's really kind of where these models are really headed, right? The gains that we're seeing in terms of these models over the last 3 to 6 months is really more so on the reasoning side of things. It's not getting any better from like a summary perspective. It's already really good at that stuff, but it's really kind of how it's able to reason on its own without giving specific directions that these models are starting to get really good at, or getting better at, that they were terrible at just last year. And that's part of what we're trying to test, and it's the ability to kind of figure those things out on their own and give you some results. And then you can ask it questions to clarify, but you want it to be able to kind of come up with some results on its own without you having to prompt it exactly for what you're looking for. How do you provide it with the earnings call itself? You don't have to. It pulls the data, because that's publicly available information that is available anywhere. So you don't have to give it the earnings call itself. It's able to just pull that information on its own. Really fantastic from that perspective. What does Grok cost? It's free. Grok is free. You can pay more to be able to have it. The only thing that you have to pay for Grok is if you wanted to do the technical analysis part, meaning if you wanted to be able to upload a document for it to, an image for it to analyze the technical analysis part, you have to pay for it. It's as low as like $10 a month for the cheapest plan. So it's pretty low in terms of pricing, but yeah. A lot of you are chiming in saying use this model or that model. Fantastic. If you're trying out different models, great. Please try us out as many models as you can get your hands on and please let us know if you find any of them working better than the ones that I've suggested here. That's part of why we have this community. There almost 1,000 of you showed up to this live event today. So many of you have probably tried out different models. Let us know what you found. Write into us. Send me an email. Tell me what you found. I'd love to hear from you. And if we find anything interesting, we'll disseminate that information to you guys on the next session. And certainly, if you found a good model, I'll test it out and let you know if I see some good results in the next session. The OptionsPlay GPT is currently in the process of being updated. It has not been updated since we last spoke about it. Grok is free. There's a free version and there's a paid version that's, I think 10 to 20 bucks. So pretty nominal in terms of cost given what you're getting out of it. Okay, that's all the time that I have questions for today. Again, really, really, took us a lot of time to do this work, but I'm glad that we did this work and shared it with you. And I hope that you guys find this useful. And I hope that you guys are able to utilize some of these tools to become far more productive, far more objective, far more accurate research analysts in your trading and be able to get some gains out of this. Thank you so much. I hope you guys have a great trading day and see you guys here on the next session.